My name is Lauren Mitchell. I was 34. Have you ever sat at a table and listened to your own family decide your entire future for you? Out loud, as if you weren't even in the room? Mine did. My brother and his wife were expecting their fifth child, and my parents announced to everyone, before asking me, that I'll be quitting my career to raise all five for free. They were so sure I would say yes that they already told the relatives. I said one word instead. Before I tell you what it was and what it cost them, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Have you ever been treated as the family's spare resource? The one whose time, whose career, whose entire life is assumed to exist for everyone else's convenience? I need to explain how my family saw me, because the dinner only made sense inside that picture. There were two of us, my brother Mark and me. Mark was the golden one, the one who did everything the family considered real. Married young, bought a house, started having children immediately, and never stopped. By the time this story happened, he and his wife Stephanie had 4 kids and a fifth on the way. In my family's eyes, that made him a success, provider, a man building something. And me, I was 34 and married, no children, living alone in an apartment I loved, working a career none of them had ever once asked me a single real question about. To them, that did not add up to a life. It added up to availability. A woman with no husband and no kids. In their math, was a woman with nothing to protect and nothing better to do. What none of them understood, because none of them ever asked, was what my life actually contained. They saw the absence of a husband and children and assumed the rest was empty space. It was not. I had spent 10 years building a career in finance. I was good at it, well paid, and on the edge of a promotion I had worked toward for years. I owned my apartment outright in a way my brother, with his mortgage and his 5 mouths to feed, did not own anything. I had savings, investments, a quiet, deliberate, carefully built independence. I had friendships I had tended for decades, a life of travel I had quietly built around the work I loved, a calendar that was full in ways that did not photograph well at a family gatherings but mattered enormously to me. My life was not a waiting room for a husband who hadn't arrived. It was a life, chosen, built, and complete. But I had also learned somewhere along the way that the less my family knew about my success, the more peaceful my life was. So I let them keep their picture of me as the aimless single sister. It cost me nothing, or so I thought, right up until the night they tried to spend a life they didn't know I had. The dinner was at my parents' house. Mark and Stephanie had called the family together to announce the fifth pregnancy. And there was cake, and there were congratulations, and for a while it was an ordinary happy family evening. Stephanie talked about how overwhelmed they already were with sport. Mark joked about needing a bigger car. And my parents, sitting at the head of the table, exchanged a look I should have paid more attention to, because that look was the look of two people who had already solved the problem in their heads and were about to announce the solution as if it were a gift. My mother stood up. She has a way of standing up before she says something she considers important, a little performance of significance. She raised her glass and she said that she had wonderful news, that the family had found the perfect way to support Mark and Stephanie through his difficult, blessed time. And then she looked at me, smiling, and she said it. She said that I would be leaving my job to become the children's full-time caregiver, that I would move closer, or perhaps move in, and take over the daily raising of all 5 children, so that Stephanie could rest and Mark could focus on work. She said it will be wonderful for me too, and I will remember these words for the rest of my life, because I didn't have a family of my own to worry about. So I finally had a chance to be part of one. I want you to sit with the architecture of that sentence, because it was a small masterpiece of how my family worked. In one breath, she had announced the plan I had never agreed to, framed my actual life as an absence, and recast their taking of my time as a generous gift to me. I was not being asked to sacrifice, I was being offered the privilege of being used. And the most chilling part was how rehearsed it sounded. This was not an idea that had occurred to her in the moment. This was a decision that had been discussed, refined, and approved in rooms I had never been invited into, and was now simply being read aloud to me like a verdict that had already been signed. The table erupted in approval. An aunt clapped. Stephanie teared up and said she didn't know how to thank me. Mark nodded like a man who had just been handed exactly what he had expected to be handed. My father smiled, the satisfied smile of a man watching a problem get solved at no cost to himself. And the thing that struck me sitting there was not even the audacity of it. It was a certainty. Nobody at the table was waiting to hear whether I would agree. They weren't asking, they were informing. The decision had been made in some earlier conversation I was never part of, and this dinner was not a request. It was an announcement of a verdict, with me cast as the grateful defendant. I let the room settle. I have learned in my work and in my life that the people who speak first in a moment like that lose, and the people who wait win. So I waited until the clapping died down, until they were all looking at me, until the silence had that expectant quality for room waiting for a grateful yes. And then I said one word, no. If you have ever wanted to say that one word to your own family and felt the entire weight of a lifetime pressing on you not to, drop the word no in the comments. I want to see how many of us have stood exactly where I stood, with a single syllable caught in our throats. I want you to understand what that one word did to the room, because it was extraordinary. It was as if I had spoken a language no one there had ever heard. My mother's smile did not so much fall as freeze, caught between the expressions she had prepared and the reality she had not. My father set down his fork. Stephanie looked confused, genuinely confused, as though a kitchen appliance had declined to turn on. And Mark laughed. The short, dismissive laugh of a man certain this was a misunderstanding that would resolve itself in his favor, the way everything always had. It is hard to describe the specific quality of that silence unless you have lived inside a family like mine. It was not the silence of people considering a point of view. It was the silence of a machine encountering an input it was not built to process. For 34 years, I had been the part of the family that said yes. Yes to hosting, yes to lending, yes to absorbing whatever overflow the others produced. My yes was so reliable that it had stopped being noticed, the way you stop noticing the floor until it isn't there. And now the floor had spoken. The silence was the sound of every person at the table trying to fit a single syllable into a world view that had no slot for it. My mother recovered first. She did what people like my mother always do when met with a no. She acted as though she hadn't heard it. She said warmly that she understood it was a big change, that of course I would need a little time to get used to the idea, that we could talk about the details later. She was already moving past my answer, folding it into the plan as a small speed bump. And that, right there, is the thing I want you to notice, because it is the heart of how families like mine operate. My no was not treated as an answer. It was treated as a feeling, a nervous flutter to be soothed, managed, and overridden. The actual decision in their minds had already been made. My job was only to come around to it. So I said it again, and this time I added to it, in the same calm, even voice I had used for the first one. I said, no, I won't be quitting my job. I won't be raising Mark and Stephanie's children. And I'll appreciate it if you would never again volunteer my life to other people without asking me. The temperature in the room dropped. Mark stopped laughing. And then the family did the second thing families like mine always do when the soothing fails. They got angry. Because a no that can't be soothed has to be punished. Mark went first. He said I was being selfish, that family helps family, that he and Stephanie were drowning, and I was choosing my little spreadsheets over actual children, my own flesh and blood. Stephanie cried hard and said she thought I loved the kids. as if declining to embrace them full time and for free was the same as not loving them. My father, who rarely spoke at these things, said he was disappointed in me, that he had raised me to put family first. And my mother delivered the line she had clearly been saving, the one designed to end the conversation. She said that it wasn't as if I was doing anything important with my life anyway. There it was, the belief that had powered the entire plan, said out loud at last. It wasn't as if I was doing anything important. I could have argued, I could have told them about the promotion, the salary, the career they had never asked about. I could have laid my real life out on that table and watched their faces change. But I didn't. I want to tell you why, because it matters. I didn't owe them my resume. My right to say no to raising 5 children did not depend on having something impressive to be doing instead. Even if I had been doing nothing at all, even if I had been exactly the aimless single sister they imagined, the answer would still have been no. And it will still have been complete. A person does not have to justify declining to give their entire life away, so I didn't justify it, I just held the no. I stood up, I thanked my parents for dinner, and I left, with the whole table still talking about me as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person who had just spoken. Quick pause here, because I know some of you are recognizing your own family in this, the relative who decided your time belonged to them, the parent who mistook your kindness for no opening voice. If that's you, the resource I keep pinned can point you toward people who actually understand boundaries and family dynamics. I'm telling a story, not giving advice, and the difference matters. So check the description and the pinned comment below. What happened over the following weeks is the part that taught me the most about my family, because they did not accept the no. They escalated. First came the flood of messages. My mother, my aunt, even my cousins I barely spoke to, all delivering versions of the same script, that I was breaking the family's heart, that Stephanie was struggling and it was on my conscience, that a good daughter, good sister, good aunt would never abandon children who needed her. The word abandoned did a lot of work in those messages, as though I had agreed to something and then walked away, rather than decline something I was never asked about in the first place. The messages had a rhythm to them, and once I recognized it, I could not unsee it. They came in waves, time for maximum effort, a guilt message in the morning so it would sit with me all day. A photo of the children in the evening, captioned with something about how much they loved their auntie. A long, wounded paragraph from my mother late at night, the hour when resolve is weakest. It was, I realized, a campaign, not a conversation, a campaign, designed not to hear me but to wear me down, to make saying yes feel like a relief and saying no feel like a wound I was inflicting on people I loved. I had seen pressure tactics before in negotiations, in the careful way people try to move you off a position. I had simply never expected to see them deployed against me by my own mother over a dinner table decision. Then came the pressure campaign in person. My mother started showing up at my apartment and announced, which is how she discovered for the first time what my apartment actually looked like. I watched her take in the space, the quality of it, the obvious fact that I was not the struggling, aimless woman she had built her plan around. I saw the calculation move across her face, and instead of prompting an apology, it sharpened her resolve. Because now there was a new argument. I had so much in market, so little. So surely the fair thing, the family thing, was for me not to give some of it up. My independence had stopped being proof that I had a life worth protecting and started being evidence that I was selfish for protecting it. She walked through my rooms like an assessor. She commented on how big the place was for one person, how quiet, how it seemed a shame to have all this and no one to share it with. Every observation was a small hook, an attempt to reframe my carefully built life as something hollow that I was hurting. And when that didn't move me, she tried the direct version. She sat on my own kitchen table in my own home and told me that since I clearly had so much room and so much money and so much time, she didn't understand what I was clinging to so hard. She genuinely did not understand. In her framework, a thing you had was a thing the family could claim. The idea that my life could be mine simply because it was mine was not a concept she had room for. That is a trap, and I want to name it clearly because it catches so many of us. In a family like mine, your success is never yours. It's a surplus the family is entitled to redistribute. The moment they discovered I was doing well, my doing well became their argument for why I owed them. There is no version of yourself that satisfies a family operate on that logic. Do badly, and you have nothing better to do, so you should serve. Do well, and you have plenty to spare, so you should serve. The conclusion is fixed, only the reasoning changed to fit it. I have watched the same logic operate on other people, and it always works the same way. It's a heads I win, tails you lose machine, and the person inside it can never find the move that ends the game. Because the game was never about the move, it was about the role. I was the giver, and givers do not get to stop giving simply because giving no longer suits them. That's the unspoken rule. And the only way to win a game with a breached rule is to refuse to keep playing it, which is a thing that looks from the inside of the family exactly like betrayal. There is no clean way to leave a role everyone else needs you to keep filling. You just have to be willing to be called the villain for setting it down. The breaking point came when I learned what they had done while I was busy holding my ground. Mark and Stephanie, so confident I would eventually cave, had made decisions based on my unpaid labor as though it were already secured. Stephanie had given notice at the part-time job and that had provided their child care arrangement. They had, I learned, even spoken to people about it, told the wider family was settled, built their plans for the new baby around the free full-time caregiver they had assigned to themselves. My no had no just declined the request. It had collapsed the structure they had already started building on a foundation that was never theirs to build on. This is what entitlement does when it goes unchallenged for long enough. It stops feeling like a request and starts feeling like a fact. Mark did not experience my no as me declining to help. He experienced it as me taking something away from him. Because in his mind, my help was already his, already spent, already counted in the budget of his life. The labor I had never agreed to give had become, in the family's accounting, a thing I was now stealing back. And when that structure wobbled, the family did not turn to Mark and ask why he had counted on something he was never promised. They turned me to, and they blamed me for the wobble, because in the story they all agreed on, the problem was never that they had tried to conscript me. The problem was that I had refused to be conscripted. So I made a decision. I had tried calm refusal. I had tried explanation. I had tried simply leaving. None of it had landed because none of it threatened the belief underneath everything. The belief that my no was negotiable. So I did the one thing that finally made it real. I stepped back. Not in anger, not with a speech. I simply stopped absorbing. I stopped answering the guilt messages. I stopped attending the dinners where I would be ambitious. I stopped being available for the endless small favors I had always quietly provided. The airport pickups, the loans that were never repaid, the holidays I always hosted, the 1,000 ways I had been in the family's paid resorts without ever being thanked for any of it. I said no to the big thing. No, I said no to the entire arrangement that had made them think the big thing was even possible. I did not announce it. It did not send a dramatic message declaring my withdrawal that would have given them something to argue with, a position to attack, a feeling to manage. Instead, I simply became unavailable in the quite undeniable way that facts are unavailable. The pickup didn't happen because I was busy. The loan wasn't offered because I didn't offer it. The holiday wasn't at my place because I didn't host it. One by one, the small invisible services I had provided for years simply stopped. And the family began to feel the shape of everything I had been doing precisely because I was no longer doing it. You never notice the weight someone carries until they put it down and you are the one standing under it. And here's what happened. The thing I least expected. The family didn't collapsed without me. Mark and Stephanie forced to confront the fact that no one was coming to save them for free. Did what they should have done from the beginning. They made real arrangements. They adjusted their own lives. Stephanie found genuine child care. Mark picked up the responsibility of the family he had chosen to build. It turned out the catastrophe my one word was supposed to cause was no catastrophe at all. It was simply the moment the people who had outsourced their choices for me were finally handed those choices back. They never asked what my career meant to me, because they were sure it was nothing. They never asked what my life contained, because they were sure it was empty. They never asked whether I wanted to raise 5 children, because they were sure a woman like me had nothing better to want. 3 assumptions, and every single one of them was a door they had locked themselves behind, certain I was too small to ever open it. It took months for the noise to die down. Some relatives never forgave me. To this day, there are people in my extended family who tell the story as the time Lauren abandoned her brother's children, and I have made my peace with that, because I have learned that you can't control the story people tell when the truth makes them uncomfortable. What I can control is whether I live inside their version or my own. My mother and I reached a fragile, distant peace eventually, though it was never an apology. The closest she came was telling me months later that she just hadn't realized how serious I was. As if my life had been a bluff she had been calling rather than a thing I was allowed to keep. I let that be the closest thing to understanding I was going to get, because some people will spend their lives unable to say the words, "I was wrong," and waiting for those words from them is just another way of giving them your life. I decided I would rather have a smaller, honest distance than a close, this honest peace that cost me myself. That trade is one a lot of people are afraid to make. I understand why, but I have never once regretted it. I did not win by becoming cruel, and I want to be clear about that, because cruelty was never the point. I didn't sabotage Mark. I didn't humiliate my parents. I didn't tell them what they had cost me until much later and quietly. I won by refusing to disappear into the role they had assigned me. I won by discovering that the most powerful word in the language is the smallest one, the one we are trained from childhood never to say to the people who claim to love us. For most of my life, I had believed that being a good daughter meant being an endless yes, that love and self-erasure were the same thing, that the way you proved you belonged to a family was by letting them spend you. It took one dinner and one word to learn that none of that was true. They were so certain I would say yes that they told the whole family before they ever told me. They just never considered that the quiet sister, the one with supposedly nothing important to do, had spent her whole life learning exactly how much her own life was worth. So let me ask you before you go, if your family stood up at a table and volunteered your entire future to someone else, your job, your time, your years, and dared you with all their certainty to object, would you swallow it to keep the peace? Or would you say the one word that finally made them see you? What would you have done? Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it reminded you of something or someone, take a slow breath, because you made it through and so did she. And all events and characters in this story are fictional and created only for entertainment and educational purposes. We hope it reminds you that loving your family and refusing to be erased by them are not opposites, and that no is a complete sentence, even when the people who raised you taught you it wasn't.